So good afternoon. Big thank you to the organizers for the invitation. In my talk, I want to address three questions, taking a slightly different spin. I want to look at what is ready for Big Three implementation now, what blocks implementation, and what is the programs could do to move this forward. Now, by way of disclosure, I've worked 20 plus years in the adoption on the commercial side of biomarkers. Currently, I'm Chief Medical Officer of I-ELCAP, a diagnostic company developing metabolism-based biomarkers. We call those the GAGOME, you'll see them, but I'm applying the same readiness criteria to the GAGOME than to any other modality included. Now, one scan, three diseases. We have heard this over and over again the last days. Some of the biomarkers look at lung cancer, some look bigger. Here are some key numbers from the LUMAScan study. That's a small feasibility study, I'll come to that. Lung cancer mortality around 20%, no news to this group. In 47% of screening participants, the spirometry done thereafter showed COPD. And 43% of that population had moderate to severe coronary calcium, requiring cardiology consultation. So together, and again, we heard that, that's a major share of premature mortality and potentially death. So the challenge we're facing from an implementation perspective is move low-dose CT from a single-purpose scan to a multi-organ prevention platform. This is unique as a public health opportunity and as an implementation challenge. What makes it feasible is the high population overlap in the screening eligible tobacco users that we are here talking about. Now, personally, I expect the adoption of the Big Three to be a lot faster than what we've heard from Claudia Henschke spending decades for lung cancer, because the signal for the multi-disease is already available and it supports evidence generation, which usually takes the longest time in this. So actually, this moves the implementation barrier from signal detection to program design. That means we need to look at workflow, reimbursement, and referral pathways. One distinction I want to highlight for this talk, because it actually explains the differences in barriers and in the implementation sequence. So the Big Three, and we just saw it earlier, involve two different types of biomarkers. Stratification biomarkers, they sit before the scan. Clinical risk models like PLCO and LLP, the polygenic risk scores we just saw, liquid biopsy markers, potentially. They decide who gets scanned. And their main barriers are regulatory and, of course, economic. We just saw the numbers, below $100. That's a big hurdle for most of the markers that currently are under development. And then we have actionable markers. They sit inside the scan. We heard an awful lot about them the last day and a half. Nodules, coronary calcium, and emphysema. They determine what happens after the scan. And their main barriers are workflow and reimbursement, because the solutions are available. So I very highly summarize level, the lung nodules are systematically read today. We've heard those and seen those numbers. Emphysema is visible, but it's variably reported, and then coronary calcium is captured, but not systematically extracted. So the signals are there, and this lowers the regulatory hurdle and makes the cost incremental, which is an important aspect. The question is, are we acting upon them? So the LUMAScan cohort, for those who are not familiar, done in France, 300 people. It's not a definitive utility of proof. It's a one-stop shop where somebody boldly tried Big Three screening in France in real life. So it gave a feasibility signal. You've seen the numbers before. 4% had lung cancer after 5.8 years of follow-up. 27% of participants had unknown obstructive lung disease, and 43 moderate to severe coronary calcium. And in the cohort, similar to what we've seen before, cardiovascular mortality exceeded lung cancer mortality. So if similar patterns apply around the world in your setting, any program focusing only on lung modules is very likely under-addressing a major share of actionable risk and opportunity. So when applying a readiness lens based on ACCE, a framework assessing accuracy, clinical validity, utility, and ethical feasibility, what usually payers do or commercial companies do, coronary calcium emerges as the most implementation-ready component. Why? It's already visible on CT, it's guideline endorsed, it's increasingly automatable with AI, and it's linked to clear preventive pathways. So again, not a signal problem, an implementation problem. It appears really a paradox. We see the calcium is guideline recommended, even the radiologists report it, but it's not routinely implemented with the screening programs. So there are many reasons we heard about them. And I'm not going to repeat them all, but the key point from my perspective is they are not operationalized together in practice. It's a missed opportunity. Hang on a second. Treatment of coronary calcium positive impacts outcome, and we've heard about the power of zero, a very strong negative predictor. So we have proof coronary calcium works, so how do we make sure we act on it? So the shift is simple, and the UK has showed this already. We need to move from opportunistic findings to a protocolized management, from incidental findings to defined action pathways. Who reports it, who owns it, and what happens next? So coronary calcium is the most ready marker for implementation. What about the other biomarkers? This matrix adapts the ACCA framework for an integrated screening text. So look at the left margin, you can see the two tiers label, the actionable markers on the top, stratification markers below. Coronary calcium and the scan followed with the spirometry are green across all dimensions, but clearly it takes the spirometry. Cell-free DNA fragmentomics is emerging. We've seen data with about an 80% sensitivity in lung cancer, but that's not for the big three. And then we have 4MP, and even the data we've just seen from Chris Amos. These, similar to the glycosaminoglycans, are in the early phase. They mostly remain yellow and red. So the pattern here is clear. The actionable markers are ready. The stratification markers need more time. So the barriers we are facing are structural barriers. What needs to be addressed is first the workflow. LumaScan showed centralized coordination sustains participation. We've seen 80, 90% participation in the first year. It's program level design that drives this, not individual clinician effort. Second, the referral pathways. Who acts on the findings? These incidental findings need named owners and defined pathways. That infrastructure does not exist in most of the screening programs. And third, economics. In the US, T-codes are emerging. In Europe, it's the pilot budgets that support implementation, but there is no full reimbursement for the big three yet. Payers do fund not the innovation, but they want to see the value in the real world. So there's three parallel tracks. The solution is in a parallel model, and they're moving at different speeds. There's the operational track, where you deploy low-dose scanning with coronary calcium and spirometry there where you have the infrastructure. You need to define the pathways and the ownership up front. Start with standardizing CT acquisition. We heard a lot about this. Define a minimum data set and track outcome. Then you have the evidence track, validating prospectively within those operational programs. Recalibrate the risk models using program data. And the evidence gates we are facing are concrete. Goal 2026 guidelines now endorse opportunistic detection from COPD. SOLACE, we will hear soon, and the US Preventive Task Force in 2027-2028 is the single most event for regulatory of Big Three. And then finally, the technology track. Standardized data acquisition and build scalable logistics. Mature the health economy down the way. Key is that the operational track on the left generates the data that the evidence and the technology tracks need. That is why we need to start now, not after the evidence is complete, so that the evidence can be produced efficiently. The key messages, let me close with the main four. Low-dose CT is already a multi-organ platform. We are just running it as a single disease service. Second, coronary calcium is the clearest place to start. Visible, actionable, increasingly automatable, but still not acted upon. That's an easy change. Third, a minimum viable Big Three model can start now in those programs which are already up and running. And fourth, do not wait for blood biomarkers. Add them later, once programs are already working. Finally, implement the whole thing as a learning system. Deploy what is actionable now, not because the evidence is perfect, but to create it. The operational track isn't just delivering care, it's turning one program's experience into the field's standard. Thank you.